Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for part 2 of our Taking a Drop series in the definition series. My name is Jason Funderburg. I'm going to be moderating and asking some questions during our Q&A sections of the presentation. I'm joined today by the entire tournament department. Chris Roselle and Kirby Martin are going to be helping answer questions in the questions tab. I'm also joined by Neil Gilman, who's going to be presenting today's webinar. Before we do, just want to remind everyone that today's webinar is being recorded along with all of our webinars. Those can be found at gapgolf.org/gap-webinars and will be posted about a few hours after this has been held. Without further ado, Neil, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jason, and thanks everybody for coming back. Today's topics are a little more complex yesterday, things we were giving you for free yesterday. Today we're going to be a little bit meaner. We're going to be telling you what your relief is, if you're entitled to any relief that is, and then where you're going to take that reference point or that nearest point of complete relief. That being said, if you missed out on yesterday's presentation, like Jason said, it will be available. And if you have any questions about anything from yesterday, feel free to ask that, and we'll do our best to answer those as well. But without further ado, we'll jump into today's presentation. You can see down at the bottom there, we're going to tackle boundary objects, integral objects, nearest point of complete relief, and the point of maximum available relief. So our first object is an integral object, and which is an artificial object defined by the committee as part of the challenge of playing the course from which free relief is not allowed. Two examples you see over here on the right of our screen is you often see common, maybe surrounding a green or a fairway, is one of these retaining walls, oftentimes marked within the margins of the penalty area. That's going to be an integral object. It is not, you're not going to get relief from that if it is where it is. Integral objects are treated as immovable. I don't necessarily love the word immovable because your mindset automatically goes to an immovable obstruction, but you can't, the way I think of it is you can't move it, you can't do anything with it. So the integral object is treated as immovable. However, if part of the integral object meets the definition of a movable obstruction, that part is treated as a movable obstruction. So our first really kind of difficult concept there, we talked about this briefly yesterday as someone asked a question, but part of this integral object given by the example here is this fence, and the gate there is meeting the definition of a movable obstruction. Committee hasn't made that part of the integral object, then that part is treated as a movable obstruction. Artificial objects defined as the committee as integral objects are not obstructions or boundary objects. They're just part of challenging and playing the course. So as you can see on the example at the top right of your screen, sprinkler head. If for reasons the committee has declared this as an integral object, you're not going to get relief from that. It is not considered to be, integral objects are not obstructions. And the same can be said about boundary objects, which we'll actually talk about a little more on this next slide. So boundary objects are defining or showing the out of bounds. These can include, and they're not limited to, walls, fences, stakes, and railings from which free relief is not allowed. These are the objects that are showing us the boundaries of the golf course. Many times you'll see these rock walls, these fences, as well as in the bottom right example, some stakes. It's not uncommon that sometimes you'll see a road define the margins of the golf course as a boundary object. So one thing about boundary objects, in this example here, you can see that it includes the base or any post of that boundary fence. So oftentimes when you do see those steel fences, you see that concrete support structure. And you can actually, if you look closely enough, you can see the 3 golf balls there that are kind of lining up, and there seems to be some twine that is using to measure the margins of that that boundary object. So the base and the post are part of that boundary object. However, angled supports or guy wires are attached to the wall or fence, or any steps, bridge, or similar construction for the getting over that wall or fence are not part of that boundary object. It's important, though, to pay attention to your notice to competitors or the local rules in effect for the day, as sometimes the margins for the boundaries are identified by those angled supports at times. So you want to make sure you're aware of what defines the margins of the golf course, the out of bounds line, for when you're playing your round. Boundary objects are treated as immovable, even if they actually are movable or any part of them is movable. So in a previous example, you saw some of those stone walls. You can't take parts of those stones out to make your ball playable. That stone wall was treated as a boundary object, and no parts of that boundary object are actually movable. Same can be said about these stakes here. It'd be pretty convenient to be able to move that stake and make a pretty complete and full swing. However, that stake is an immovable object, so you cannot actually move it to help better make your swing. There is a note to a rule here, Rule 8.1, players' actions that improve conditions affecting the strokes and actions that are not allowed. It goes into some of the specifics about what to do if you do move that boundary object, such as the stake, and if there's a penalty attached to that, and when that penalty, if there is one, when that would be applied. So if you'd like to continue to do some further reading, I encourage you to read 8.1. And just like our integral objects, boundary objects are not obstructions or integral objects. So we reached our first question slide. Anything going on so far, Jason?
I got one here. In the example of the 3 balls near the fence with the concrete base, where does the out of bounds line the front of the concrete or the actual fence?
See if I can get back there for you. Okay, so the question about this example over here on the right, there's 2 golf balls that are pretty evident as defining the margins of the boundary object. We have the 1 golf ball on the left of the line, you can see is in the golf course side, so that ball's inbounds, as well as the one in the furthest right is out of bounds. Based on where this twine is actually being strung from, they've identified the boundary to be looks like the outermost edge golf course side at ground level to be the margin of the boundary object. So that extends there. So if the concrete is the margin of the boundary, it would be from the outermost edge of the boundary object there. I hope that clears that question up.
Hey, Neil, it's the inside part at ground level of the stakes.
Yeah,
that's where the string is strung from. It's not the actual chain link part of the fence. It's the inside level at ground level of the stakes for the fence.
Yeah, so thanks, Kirby, for clearing that up. The margin, as you can see from that line, extends from that post to post.
And that's by definition.
Perfect. Well, that's all we have for the question section right now, but we definitely encourage everyone to submit any questions you have. If we can't get to it verbally today, we will answer personally to you as well.
So the next topic we'll actually jump into then is nearest point of complete relief. And here you can see 5 examples, which we're going to take the nearest point of complete relief. And those two include an abnormal course condition, a dangerous animal condition, a wrong green, or a no play zone, or in taking relief under any certain local rules. You can see all the rules attached to these specific examples. But one of the ones that I know that you don't get complete relief from is an unplayable lie. Unfortunately, I've heard of people giving complete relief from that, and I'm not sure how that could be defined. But a nearest point of complete relief is an estimated point where the ball would lie that is nearest to the ball's original spot, but not near the hole within that spot. As you can see in our example below, the gentleman has put his ball on the cart path in the middle of that cart path, and based on where his position lies, and his ball's position and his orientation, going to the left of the cart path would be his nearest point of complete relief. As you can see, there's 4 feet to the left and 6 feet to the right. However, if this player was a left-handed golfer, our orientation might change us so that we are now going to the left, excuse me, to the right instead of the left. The estimated point has to be in the required area of the course. Again, referencing one of our previous webinars, Kirby identified the areas of the golf course: the general area, putting green, teeing area, and penalty area. And what we mean by complete relief is where the condition does not interfere with the stroke the player would have made from the original spot if the condition was not there. What we mean by this is if we were going to hit a low running pitch shot, for example, under this tree, we have to simulate that same stroke when we're taking our relief. The player is not required to hit the same shot when he does get his relief. He is just required to simulate that shot when he's going to take his relief. Estimating this reference point requires the player to identify the choice of club, swing, and line of play he or she would have used for that stroke. So when you're taking your relief and you need to get your nearest point of complete relief, and you've got 120 yards, you're not going to be able to use your driver to identify that nearest point of complete relief. Once you do get your relief, you're not subject to playing with that same 120-yard club if you want to change the way the play is, you're going to play the stroke towards the hole, but you are required to use that club as you would have for taking relief. And again, you don't need to simulate the stroke by actually taking the stance or swing with the chosen club, but it is recommended that the player normally do this in helping to make an accurate estimate. Here we have another example, and a phrase you've all probably heard by now is that the nearest point of complete relief doesn't always result in the nicest point of complete relief. So as you can see here, the player's ball will rest onto the right side of the cart path, and he's got a pretty clear look at the hole from there. However, if he were to take his relief, it would put him in that tree. That tree is obviously not an easier shot, so the player may elect to play the ball as it lies. But the nearest point of relief of complete relief relates solely to the particular condition from which the relief is being taken from, and may be in a location where there is interference by something else. So just going back on this example here, if this tree was a separate and movable obstruction in which, or ground under repair for that matter, in which the committee has not determined to be part of the same obstruction, this player may get relief twice by dropping from the immovable obstruction that is the cart path, or that separate condition that could be to the right of this player's nearest point of relief. If the player takes relief and then has interference by another condition from which he is entitled to relief, the player may take relief again by determining a new nearest point of relief from that new condition. So a good way to think about this as well is you don't necessarily want to pick up your golf ball until you actually know where your drop it might be. If you pick up your golf ball, there's a few other things that you're going to be working with. We're going to take relief, but it might not be in the nearest spot. And you might need to take relief from a different condition should that have interference from your new point on the golf course. However, relief must be taken separately from each condition. And just one of these confusing concepts here, but we'll work through it. Except that the player may take relief from both conditions at the same time. When having already taken relief separately from each condition, it becomes reasonable to conclude that doing so will result in continued interference by one another. So a lot of words there, but what we're trying to say is that if our nearest point of relief to the right has interference from another object on that side, and then our continued nearest point of relief also gets us back into the interference of that condition that we had over to the left, we're going to be able to take that relief simultaneously. We're not going to make you continue to go through this process to drop and drop and drop. It would be prudent or wise of the committee to, as we alluded to earlier, identify these situations and mark some of them as a part of the same obstructions. A lot of times you'll see in gap events, you'll see that some of the cart paths have these run-up areas that are worn down or to meet the definition of ground under repair, or maybe have gravel that we would treat as an immovable obstruction. But we would mark that all to be part as of the same obstruction, so that we're not taking relief from the two different areas. We're taking relief as treated as part of the same area. Again, so here are the things that we went over from yesterday as well as today. So you have your free relief as identified by those objects there, and some of the objects that we went over today, the boundary objects, integral objects, and the nearest point of complete relief. Jason, that's about all I have. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple here. Just want to remind everyone, I know Chris sent it to everyone, but all of our recorded webinars are at gapgolf.org/gap-webinars. One question for you here. Please explain how the type of shot you are going to hit helps determine nearest point of complete relief.
Sure. So I'll come back to that example where the gentleman is looking to take his relief. So you can see this gentleman is trying to play a shot that will be a low running shot under this tree. So when we say that the type of shot is going to help determine our nearest point of relief, let's think about it in the same way that he's not going to be hitting a driver or anything like that for this shot. So he's going to have a club that's going to be being able to get under this tree, and a low running shot, not something he's necessarily going to elevate. So when we're taking his relief, he's going to assume as if he were taking that same shot. He was hitting a low running shot when taking his relief. As you can see from the examples of this gentleman's relief, over to the left and over to the right, he's taken a similar stance and a similar swing a similar stance, and he's going to play a similar shot. When this ball does become the ball in play, he's not entitled or does not required to have to play that low running shot anymore. He may play a different shot. He just needs to use that shot to get his complete relief.
Hey, Neil,
Yes,
and that could affect the club that he's choosing and the point where the nearest point, right? Because the club might be different.
correct. Yeah. So yeah, so he could actually, his club could be different when he's taking this shot. Yes.
So, I mean, if he's trying to hit a low running 4-iron, that that nearest point of complete relief might be different than if he was trying to hit a wedge.
Yeah, correct, Kirby. So again, as Kirby alluded to, when this gentleman was taking his relief, he may have had a wedge originally to hit his low running shot, but he may need to hit that low running shot a 4-iron, and that could change his nearest point of complete relief, being that a 4-iron is a little bit longer, or his stance may be altered because of that.
Neil, we also had a follow-up off of this example of, do you have to take the relief, or can you just play off the cart path if you don't like where the relief puts you?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're not always required to take relief from an immovable obstruction in this example. A lot of times, like we talked about, nearest point is not the nicest point of relief, and that in turn might put you in a tree or might put you in a shot that you don't want to hit, a ball above your feet, for an example. So you're not required to take that nearest point of relief, but if you want to, you can play the ball as it lies for this example.
Perfect. Well, that looks like it's a wrap on our questions section. If you guys do have any other questions, please feel free to send them over to us via email or give us a ring at the office. Want to remind everyone we do have a couple more this week. We have one tomorrow at 10 a.m. Webinar run by Kirby Martin, as well as one on Thursday that's going to be run by Chris Roselle, both of whom helped contribute today. I want to thank everyone again for joining us, taking the time out of your day to spend with us, learn a little bit of the rules, and hopefully we will see you guys tomorrow. Neil, Kirby, Chris, thank you all.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, we'll see everyone next time.